Welcome to the SDR DiscoCall podcast, a podcast designed for brand new sales development reps in the world of software as a service. Every Tuesday, we're going to be bringing you a new guest who's still in the role to share how or why they've gone into sales development. What have they learned in their SDR career and journey to date? And what 3 pieces of information would they like to share back to new and existing reps to help them become happy sellers? Every show is transcribed, recorded with links from the guests, which are available at happyselling.io/podcast. I'm going to be your host, Neil Bhuiyan, and I look forward to taking you into the world of sales development through the SDR DiscoCall podcast. So with that in mind, let's begin. Hello, all you happy podders, and welcome to another episode of the SDR DiscoCall podcast / vidcast as well. And today we're joined by a gentleman that has brought me a lot of sunshine and happiness over the past year through lockdown up until now in 2021 in April into a new quarter. It's the one and only Tom Boston from SalesLoft. Mr. Boston, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing super, and even super for seeing you today and having you on the show. So thank you so much for joining, mate.
Absolutely, good to be here.
Love it. So, Mr. Boston, for the listeners that can see you and can hear you as well, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, who are you? What do you do? And where do you work? And what do they do?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Tom Boston. I'm an SDR at SalesLoft. And for those who have seen me on LinkedIn, I do these kind of weekly LinkedIn videos, and I've been at SalesLoft as an SDR for coming up 2 years now. And I call myself an SDR veteran because I've done a few SDR roles now.
Love it. And you are indeed, so you're somebody who is very local onto LinkedIn. We see quite a lot of your videos. And if anything, that's what caught my attention. So I think it was around this time last year. I see a guy with a strong beard. He comes out with these videos which had the captions in. I was like, okay, I want to press play and actually listen to what he's talking about. And I was like, hey up, who's this lad? And I thought, right, we'll connect. And here we are today. And as you mentioned, you are a veteran. We're going to be talking about your journey, like kind of where you've been and how you've got to SalesLoft. But Tom, a bit about yourself. Like, so where are you based in the world, and what do you do outside of SalesLoft and sales? Because I'm quite interested to know, because you're quite an animated person with a lot of talent.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I find myself at the moment in Gateshead. For those who don't know where Gateshead is, just next to Newcastle in the northeast of England. If you've got a keen ear, you'll hear that I don't have a Geordie accent. I've got a broad Yorkshire accent because I was brought up in Leeds, lived there for a long time, and then moved to the northeast about 7 years ago, and have really enjoyed kind of life up here, a canny life, as they would say here in Geordie land. Kind of yo-yoed up and down the country, from Newcastle to London with various roles, and then retreated back up north when the pandemic hit to be closer to kind of family and where we call home, really, which is the north. When I'm not being an SDR or making LinkedIn videos, you'll probably find me looking after my 2-year-old son. Me and my wife are really loving kind of just spending time with him over this kind of lockdown pandemic that we're in at the moment. And yeah, we like to go to the beach. We like to see him run around. I'm not the most adventurous person. You described me as animated. I don't have a lot of hobbies. I can't talk to you about sport because I don't know anything about sport. One of my favorite things to do is have a cup of tea and a sit down. My wife will often describe as me being an 80-year-old man. I think I might be at heart. You know, I'm wearing slippers. Right now, well, there we go.
Yeah,
you know, these are the perks, right, of
working from
remote life. Yeah,
absolutely love it, Tom. Well, if anything, like I said, your videos have brought like a ray of sunshine into my weeks when I've caught across them. They've hit like I would say viral status, like the amount of people that like watch your videos, comment and share. You give a lot of sales tips, but you give it in a nice twist with humor, and there's a big comedic element to this as well. But you talk a lot of truth, sir. Again, like I said, I'm really glad to have you on the show. And yeah, I'm not really into sports either, and I love wearing slippers and having a brew and just sitting down and having a good chat. And that's what we're doing today, right?
I knew we were going to get on, Neil.
Love it. So, for the watchers out there that are watching this episode of the SDR Disco Call vidcast, if we go onto Tom's LinkedIn profile, absolutely love the cover image. So, like the different personas of Tom that we see from your videos. But obviously, if we come down a little bit, we can see that your life before tech and sales, you've had a stint in quite a few different roles and industries, and it kind of starts like obviously coming out of the University of Huddersfield with your drama BA. So now I get it. Now I get it where he gets his talent from. But you've worked within retail, you've worked within Bauer Media as part of a Metro Radio Street team. You've been a breakfast show presenter on a radio show. You've worked for the tech giant, which is Apple. I'm a bit. That's actually how I got into tech sales, because I was when the iPhone first came out. It was because of that I wanted to get into tech sales, and that's another story for another time. But yes, big fan of Apple. You've worked as an energy consultant. You've worked as an SDR at the famous Hootsuite. You've worked as a BDR at Orchard Information Systems Limited, and obviously come out to as an SDR for the last year and a half at SalesLoft. So, Tom, like, could you please walk us through like drama student to then SDR at SalesLoft? What was that journey like, sir?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot there, right? You've kind of made me think about my age, in terms of how many how many jobs I've had and roles I've had. And it's funny because I only recently just updated LinkedIn to have my entire career on there, because when I first started in the kind of SaaS space, I'd left out a lot on my profile. So the fact that I worked in a DIY store for several years
Mhm.
after leaving university, in a period of my life I describe as me being a bit lost, not really
Mhm.
knowing like what I wanted to do. I didn't have that on there, right? Because I was like, oh, I'm moving to London. I don't want people to know about the fact that I was in kind of retail for so long, and DIY. Like, what's that got to do with anything?
Mm.
But I've recently put it back on there because I'm kind of understanding now as I get older that you have to start somewhere, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
whether that's a cashier in a DIY store, and learning the kind of ropes in kind of customer service, moving on to a kind of a B2B role, and then finally into the kind of SaaS space. I wanted people who went on my profile to know that I'd kind of come from the kind of retail side of things, and I wasn't particularly in the kind of SaaS B2B world for forever. I think
Yeah.
you see a lot of people on LinkedIn, and you think, oh, they must have been doing that for years or whatever. But I think it's really important to see that people can come from all kind of walks of life, and use their experience. But yeah, drama degree. I did drama at school, and I liked it a lot. Looking back, I think I liked making people laugh more than I enjoyed anything else, and
Mm.
I've kind of stuck with that for my entire life. Doing doing the radio show again, fantastic for me to be able to do a breakfast show, and make people smile, and tell some stories and play some music, and I've kind of brought that into my more recent roles with the kind of content I'm creating alongside the SDR role at SalesLoft.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think that's an interesting piece where you say, like, with your LinkedIn profile, like you admitted stuff in the past and now you've brought it back in there because I agree with you 100%. Like, to show people like your working experience of working different industries, different sectors, doing different roles, that is work experience. That's kind of like career. People want to see where have you come from to where you are today. And I think similar to myself, used to work for Pizza Hut. I used to work for DHL and logistics, and I used to be like a housing benefit officer for local authority. And I always used to think like, would that maybe put people off wanting to connect with me? But I've also realized by putting in those jobs, sometimes when I connected with prospects is because we used to work for the same company, we worked in the same industry, and we actually had something to, talk about when we first connected. So I think it's good to put it in there as well. And I love that bit of you did drama because you like to make people laugh, and it's something that's continued throughout your career and in what you're doing. Um, and that's the other bit. So I wanted to come on to like the breakfast show, like on a radio show. Like how did that come about? I think you was working at Bauer, and then you went on to Anyone FM as well. How did that come about, sir?
Okay, yeah. So I was working for this kind of DIY retail company, and when I'd left, I'd got a job with a radio station in Leeds, and I was working for their promo team. So just doing kind of promo work out and about. If they were doing live broadcasts, they would cut to events, and we would be out there. I'd also do promotional work just for the station. When I moved to Newcastle, got a role doing similar for an for a station in the northeast, and I really enjoyed the whole kind of idea of doing radio, and I saw the presenters having a lot of fun. When I decided to get a job at Apple, I wanted to kind of keep my toe in the water of radio, so I started to look around in the northeast and see if there were any presenter roles around. And I found a community station called Any1 FM who were looking for kind of weekday presenters. So around working in the Apple store, I was able to do a show. And then a few months after doing my weekday show, I asked them if I could do the breakfast show because it was a little bit of a personal kind of dream of mine. This idea of hosting my own kind of breakfast show. Now it was community radio, right? So it wasn't kind of BBC One breakfast, but it was streamed across kind of Newcastle Gateshead on FM. You could listen online, and I describe it as the most fun I've had because it was a real ball just kind of playing songs and telling stories on a morning. So yeah, that's how that came about.
Absolutely love that, dude. And to open up a little bit about Neil's past, so I work in music as well, but way back in the day, maybe for the UK listeners who like a bit of comedy, you might know of that show called Corrupt FM. People that do nothing with MC Grinder and the pirate radio stations. I used to be on pirate radio back in the day as a young MC, and funny enough, I used to have a Tuesday show called the Thank Funk It's Tuesday Show. We'd play club classics, do a bit of hosting, but it was at that point I realized I really want to talk to people, play my own music. So I totally get that vibe. And yeah, it was community because it was pirate. It wasn't actually legal. So we only had a couple of London listeners around London, but I absolutely love that. And as you said, like, so when you was working in the Apple shop, you were able to then connect with Anyone FM, find a continuation to do the show, and then go on to the breakfast show as well. So the question pertains is how did you go from presenting to then going into your first tech job? Because I believe after that it was Hootsuite. Is that right?
Yeah, so we were we were having the time of our lives on that breakfast show. You know, I had a producer, and it was all good fun. I was working at the Apple store, and again, you know, great fun, and I really enjoyed it. But after probably about a year, and we decided to get married, me and my then girlfriend,
Fiance, but now wife.
who's now my wife.
Yeah.
We decided to get married, and you know, weddings are expensive. You know, I don't know if
Hmm.
anyone's looking to get married, but they cost a lot. So it was like, look, you know, let's maybe park that for a while and
Mm.
get a role that's gonna pay more, because as great as retail is, you know, it's not the highest paid gig around. And I'd kind of started to look around what could be a role that I could take, which would be, yeah, something I could earn a little bit of money and save for a wedding. And that's when I got
Mm.
my first B2B sales role for an energy an energy company, basically. So
Yeah.
it was selling gas and electricity. So
Mm.
it was cold calling businesses. So you're talking, yeah, 80, 100 calls a day of people who don't want to
Mm.
speak with you. So I'd gone from Apple retail,
Yeah.
where everyone loves the products and it's all about
Yeah.
kind of customer service, to this world of yeah, do you want to save money on your gas and electricity bills? And a lot of people
Mm,
hanging up and saying, in a polite way, no, thank you, Tom. You know, I don't want to buy anything from you.
mm.
I'm paraphrasing there, but again, that was a bit of a shock. But again, that's where I guess that's where I learnt the ropes, right? So my salary went up, but I also had to step my game up in regards to the work that I actually had to do. And
Yeah,
again, I'd omitted that from my LinkedIn profile, but I thought that's again a really important part of my journey. You know, I was
yeah,
the guy who worked in a call center who was trying to flog people gas and electricity, and I did that for about
yeah,
8 months, and it was off the back of that when I kind of decided to take that further, and that's when we moved. Didn't know much
mm,
about the kind of SaaS space or the SDR role. Literally, I'd Googled sales jobs in London, and
mm,
I'd stumbled across this kind of SDR role, and it was only really when we moved down and I joined the organisation that I started to learn about kind of SaaS and B2B
mm.
and what an SDR does, what an AE does. I had a lot to learn, but again, Hootsuite were really good at kind of taking me on, showing me the ropes, and getting me started.
Love it, love it. So obviously there's some pieces that I want to pick up there. So obviously, like you said, you're doing like a radio show where you're talking to people, you're working at a store at a brand where people love them and love talking to them. And then coming into, like you say, your first B2B job where there's a high element of, cold calling. They said 800 people like per day, perhaps even like, trying to flog gas and fuel and electricity to them. What was going through your mind of like, being somebody people wanted to speak to somebody that nobody really wanted to give the time of day to? How did you, like, maybe build up a tough skin or like deal with that sort of constant rejection? Because I think for a lot of listeners out there that are listening to the show, this is something they're going to face as an SDR. Like, how did you deal with it, Tom?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's tough. You know, there's no point in pretending that it's not. And if I was to tell you that I had the thickest skin in the world, I would be lying. Spent
Mm.
a lot of my day away from my desk in the toilet, kind of pondering what am I doing? What am I doing with my
Doing with my life?
what am I doing with my life, and why am I putting myself through this? Um,
Yeah.
but again, it was about going, well, let's try to use some of the things I've used in my previous roles, or some of the techniques that I know that I've got in this role, and start to find a way to kind of break through, right? So this idea of using humor on the phone, played a really big part in that role, and again,
Mm,
sounding different because I was surrounded by a lot of people sounded very, very similar, you know, and they
mm,
didn't last very long. That was the kind of place I was working, right?
mm,
If you didn't do well, then you didn't last very long. So it was kind of really important for me to go right. How do I stand out, and how do I be different? And
mm.
I'm still talking about that to this day, right? Because I believe that that's right at the heart of a kind of SDR or a lead gen role. How do I break through that noise, and how do I set myself aside? So yeah,
Yeah.
with the gas electricity kind of thing, I would often use the line of people would say that, oh, you're just going to tell me that you're the cheapest and that you're the best and you're going to save me lots of money. And I would make them laugh by saying, well, actually, we're one of the most expensive people that you could go through. And they would kind of laugh at that, right? Because I would go, we cost a fortune, but I'd say, let me tell you why, and more importantly, how we're
Mm.
helping people to invest so that they can actually save, and some of the ways
Yeah.
we work with organizations. So I kind of have a different talk track to the people who were kind of to the left and right of me that were kind of saying, look,
Yeah.
we're going to do this cheap, 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 save, save, save. I would be like, well, we're actually more expensive, but I'm going to tell you why if you can give me some time to kind of do so, and then talk about some of the value props within the organization. So it was that idea
Mm.
of, yeah, just kind of flowing in a slightly different way, and catching people off guard when on the phone is something that I'm still doing now.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that, and I think as you're saying that story, I can envision like a callback center with hundreds of desks, and like you've got all these people that look the same, sound the same, and there's this nice little like bright lampshade over Tom's desk, where he's bringing a ray of sunshine and he's doing it a different way, like you said, to break through the noise, to kind of do something different to what everybody else is doing, and having a go with it. And it kind of reminds me of my days of like telesales, like working in a corporate office. And I had to do like 120 dials a day, 2 hours call time, and try and book 2 meetings a day. But in the early days, it was scary as hell. But I kind of tried to flip it because I would sit there listening to the bank of people around me, and they sounded so professional, so eloquent, well spoken. They knew all the terminology. And I was like, I ain't got a clue what the hell I'm doing here, you know? And I think as I listened to it, to your point, it sounded very monotone. It just sounded very high business acumen. And we were trying to talk to like HR directors. Those were our personas and targets, right? But the thing that I kept saying to like my boss at the time was like, we're not experts in HR. The people that we're speaking to are, right? And if we try to sound like experts when we're not, they're probably going to smell that BS and maybe even call us out on it. So the way that I was looking at my cold calls was, here's 120 opportunities to have fun and muck about a little bit. So I would go in with a regal telephone voice and speak very professionally like this. Other days, depending on where I was dialing in the country, I'd either be a bit of a southerner, maybe I'd have maybe a bit of a Brum accent. I'll try this stuff out, just try different accents to see what works. Sometimes I'd try to be Scottish and speak like that and see what happens in Aberdeen, just to have a bit of a laugh. And I'd also love it when people would tell me no, because I'd always try to be that nice guy that no matter how rude they were to me, I'd be more polite. And that's how I'd kind of get my own back on these hard decision makers and gatekeepers, right? But having all of that fun and messing all about, you, to your point, you find your flow and you can kind of listen to the tones of people as to how they're going to react when they pick up the phone. I could almost sense a sense when they're having a bad day, when they're a bit blasé about it, they don't mind having a chat, or do you know what? They would like actually to speak to somebody outside of their office, because day in, day out, they're speaking to the same people, going maybe annoying people in their office, and just chatting to a complete stranger was a nice thing for them. So I like that element of just playing about and breaking through the noise to try and figure out, what works best. But then we come to this moment in life where you pop the question to the missus and said, "Do you know what? We're going to get married. So we're going to look for a new career." And like you said, you were searching through Google and you came across this term SDR and sales development. And obviously, like you said, with Hootsuite, they gave you some great education. But for somebody coming from up north down to south and entering this sort of SaaS and sales development, what did it mean to you, and how did Hootsuite, get you to the mindset of this actually could be a great thing for you?
Yeah, I kind of quite quickly realized that the space was more complex and exciting than I could have ever really understood. You know,
Mm,
I kind of knew that telesales was a thing, and I thought, well, SDRs are kind of like, it's telesales, right? It's just what
mm,
I've been doing. And then when I got the role and I started to look at it, and I was like, wow, there's a real opportunity to learn here and to understand specifically about industries and about structures. I really liked kind of the kind of customer success team. I would kind of work closely with them because I thought, well, that's a really interesting part of the business. And then working with the AEs for things like discovery calls and demos. Again, I kind of adding value there. And I've always tried to work closely with like the social media teams and the kind of marketing teams as well, because I feel like the SDR role, you've got such an opportunity to kind of work with multiple teams and really have an impact and a voice, especially if you join an organization like, for example, SalesLoft, who allow you to kind of do that.
mm,
I suddenly realized, well, wait a second, this is much more than a world where you do telesales and you call people up and
mhm.
try and kind of flog them things. You're actually
Yeah.
you're actually a really crucial part of the sales division, which is obviously the kind of beating heart of most organizations. So once I had that realization, I thought, well, I can really start to make an impact with organizations that I'm working for. And
Mhm.
again, that's really exciting because I think a lot of people look at the SDR role as a kind of an entry level role where you kind of at the bottom of the pile and don't really do much. But actually, if you want to, you can really start to make a difference, and yeah, almost be the face of the organization on things like social, with content that you share and all that kind of stuff.
Totally agree, dude, and I absolutely love that as well. And it's great to see, like, with companies that you're working with, like SalesLoft, they really support you guys to be creative, try your other stuff. But yeah, it's a point we've said on multiple shows that the SDR position is not just an entry into sales, but it's an entry to the whole business, right? Where you can work with customer success, with marketing, with the commercial teams, and later down the line, you can kind of figure out which one of those departments floats your boat and what's a path that you may want to follow then thereafter. Versus, I remember when I was doing telesales, it was just like, right, I do this job, I think I become an account executive. That's it.
Yes.
Don't do really much with the marketing team. We didn't really have much syncs and stuff. Um, and yeah, I think it's a case of like seeing yourself at SalesLoft with the videos of the support, but you're also speaking to a lot of other SDRs in the community. And I see that with a lot of your posts, like a lot of SDRs from different places, because SalesLoft is a great platform. And a lot of people like to use it and they like to learn stuff from people such as yourself. And to your point, like you said, it's the beating heart of an organization working within the sales team. And I think, like with the SDRs, they're the blood of that lifeline and pipeline, because you are the frontline first conversation with a potential customer and prospect that may not know about your solution. And you're the team that are reaching out to them. And what I'm loving, I've seen so much more since lockdown, is the creative ways that you engage with your audience, that you connect with people, not just solely for prospects, but the sales development community, the sales community as a whole. And you're somebody, in my opinion, you're leading that, dude. So like, hats off for that. And a question that I was asked by a student today in a class was like, Neil, I sent them like a few vidyard recordings, like to say, hi, I'm Neil from Happy Selling. This is what we're going to be learning. And they said, that's so cool the way that you sent like a video on an email. And I think we should be doing more of this. And I was like, yeah, that's the reason I do it, is to inspire them that they can do it themselves, without telling them directly go do it. But one of the students also said is like, do you know what? I want to be more active on LinkedIn. I want to do like more videos. I want to do more posts. Like, Neil, how often should I be posting? Where should I start at? And how should I go about it? And I said, go check this guy, Tom Boston, on LinkedIn, because the guy's nailed it. But for people that want to be more social on LinkedIn and do like creative content such as yourself, what tips would you give to them, Tom?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, it's all about starting small. I think that's a really important thing, right? I spoke to someone recently who was like, I want to do a podcast and I want to do a video series. I'm thinking about doing these kind of these long engagement posts, and I'm going to kind of post every day. And again, I was like, well, that sounds really exciting, but maybe kind of strip that back a little bit and go, look, where do I start, and start to try to understand like what's working for you. Now, I knew
Mm,
that I wanted to do some form of video content because I've always loved video. I've kind of been doing it in my spare time for years, right? Even when I was a kid, I used to do stop start animation with a little video camera,
nice.
kind of
Yeah.
plasticine figures. That was the kind of kid that I was when everyone was playing football outside. I was shooting these little kind of mini videos, and I've loved doing that for my whole life, right? So I thought it'd be great to do that at SalesLoft as part of the SDR role. And when I started to shoot the videos, I just did what everybody else did. I looked straight down the lens. I introduced myself. I said hello to LinkedIn because everyone says hello to LinkedIn. And I would talk about myself or my day or my role or the company values or something that I thought people wanted to hear or something that I thought
Mm,
I'd seen someone else do well. And maybe, oh, that sounded quite motivational. Well, I saw a guy do a video, oh, that got a lot of likes. And yeah, that didn't really work for me. That lasted for about 2 or 3 weeks before I
mm,
had to drop that and go, look, this is not me. I don't even
yeah.
like watching those videos back. So if I don't like watching it, how can I expect anybody else, to
To
even
like it.
give it
Yeah.
the time of day? So I started to do things that were more kind of up my street. So things that were more kind of humorous. This idea of looking at the pain points of my prospects, I thought would be a really good idea, because that's the kind of stuff that my network are going to really respond to, and would open up conversations about the SalesLoft platform. So I started to
Yeah.
shoot these kind of skits and these little mini kind of videos, which would hopefully make people smile. Now, my advice for anyone who was looking to get into creating content, whether that be video or other forms of content, would just be to start small, to set yourself a goal. I decided to commit to recording a video every single week, and it was harder than I thought, right? Because I thought, well, one a week, like that's absolutely fine. But
Mm.
those weeks sure do tick over and come around faster than you think when you commit to creating content on a weekly basis. But I challenged myself.
Yep.
I'd gone, look, I'm gonna try and do this, because that's how I'm gonna push myself to be creative, and that's how I'm gonna push myself to kind of create content and figure out what's working, because I've made stuff
Mm.
that didn't work, and I've made stuff that didn't kind of hit the mark, and I've also made stuff that's kind of blown up and really connected with people. And it's only by doing and doing kind of proactively and creating on a weekly basis that I've been able to understand what's working, what's not, what kind of content is seeing a success. So yeah, that would be my advice. Start small, try to figure out what's working for you, have a
Yep.
better understanding of what kind of content you should be.
I love that. I love that. So, kind of like you said, there may be people out there that want to do multiple things all at the same time, but like you said, start off, keep it pretty simple. Commit to like a frequency of, like you said, once a week, putting it out there, see what works, what doesn't work. But it has to be from you. It has to be like, something that you'd enjoy talking about, things that you feel are important to your network, message that you want to get out there, versus just stuff because other people are doing it as well, and trying to imitate them doesn't really bring it true. And yeah, I committed to doing that every week with this podcast, and I thought it'd be a walk in the park. I didn't understand how much work and time it takes, but over time it's that iteration, seeing what works and what doesn't, that's kind of helped us get us to where we are today. So fully agree with that. And in terms of like, so for somebody, a question that I get asked by a lot of people are like, now, how come you're churning up so much content? Like, when do you have the time to do this? And where do you get all the ideas for these guests and stuff like that? And it made me think about you. I was like, you're always coming out with these great videos and pieces of content. Where do your ideas come from, and how do you store them? And how do you decide to, okay, I'm going to go with this idea this week, and now I'm not really keen on that idea? How do you decide that, Tom?
So sometimes the ideas will kind of come to me and write themselves. So I can be on. I was on a Zoom call recently, and one of the members of the team, you know, kept saying, when are we going back in the office? When are we going to be back in the office? Are we going to be back in the office? And I thought to I just wrote that down, because I was like, well, let's just do a video on the one guy who hates remote working and just wants to be back in the office, right? So that video was about
Mm,
like recreating the office life at home, whether that be the
yeah.
commute, like a fake commute, or like putting food in the fridge and sort of pretending that you're in an office. Oh, who's left these meatballs in here? So again, that idea kind of happened in real life. I kind of wrote that down. And
Mm,
similarly with the kind of prospecting videos that I'll do, so videos that are about prospecting, there'll be real life
yeah.
things that happen to me. I got ghosted quite a lot when I came back from the Christmas break. I had a list of like
Yeah.
10 people who were like, I definitely want to speak to you, Tom. And probably 7 of them stopped replying to my emails, which prompted me to make the video about ghosting, where I recreated
Yeah.
the Boys to Men music video.
Which was great, by the
Thank you.
way. I
Thank
loved
you
it.
so much. So those ideas, they just came naturally. But on weeks where maybe I don't have these kind of light bulb moments of, oh, that's definitely a video, I'll just kind of go into like, without sounding too dramatic, like a creative kind of space, and I'll just kind of spend 10, 20 minutes jotting things down, kind of exploring ideas, and then formulating a video based on based on my kind of thoughts and ideas. But they're normally loosely based around things that have happened to me
Mm.
personally in sales, because I've got a fair few stories of the kind of trials and tribulations of a life in sales.
Definitely, I love it, and definitely what I'll do for the listeners and watchers out there in terms of our show notes, I'll put a link to a couple of my favorite ones that we've seen, so you can see Tom's videos. Highly recommend like checking them out. They're funny as AF, but they're also true because it's one of those things in sales. Like we watch them and laugh, but we're like, because that's true because we have gone through those things. We know how this dude's feeling it. And a recent one that you put out, which did catch my attention, was the whole Bant video. So Bant can be, so for those that are new to sales, like budget, authority, need, and timeline. For some of us in SaaS sales, we may see this as a bit of an outdated methodology, or it doesn't really work so much in outbound prospecting, but it might be good for when you've got an inbound lead where they do have the budget and project and timeline. What are your thoughts on Bant for the listeners that haven't watched the video? Like, what was this all about on Bant, Tom?
Well, yeah, this idea of using BAN as is something that has popped up in several roles that I've had before, and I remember one role where a manager had just been like, have you heard about BAN? You know, as if like it's like a secret. I don't know if you've heard about BAN. As if that acronym is gonna set me up for success within the role. You know,
In
as long
sales,
as I've
yeah.
got BANT in my back pocket, I'll be fine. I personally think it's one of the most outdated kind of sales techniques I've ever come across, and
Mm,
the fact that I think it's such a strange kind of way, method to follow, that you would need to find out if someone's got money, um, and you'd need to find out if they're going to sign they're going to sign the contract before you found out
yeah.
anything else. I thought was like laughable. And if I thought to myself, well, if I'm thinking it's laughable, there's probably a few salespeople out there who think the same. But I know that it's still used in lots of organisations, and it's there'll be people who are listening to this who will say, "Oh, that's all well and good, but it works, mate. You know, like your ban is the way forward." But
Mm.
I genuinely believe that this idea of creating value should be right at the beginning of any conversation that you have. And yeah, I think it's about time we put Bant to bed. Someone commented that I'd killed Bant with comedy, which is one of my favorite comments I've ever had on any of my
Yeah.
videos.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, do you know what? Like Bant was something that I used way back in the day, in those days of telesales. And I get it. It can work for some, but to that point, trying to figure out if somebody's like willing to buy, if they've got the money for it. But at the end of the day, if they didn't know they had a problem and they've never heard of the solution, why would they budget for something they never thought they was going to buy, right? And getting value at the beginning is more so like I'm a fan of a methodology called Spiced. So it's situation, pain, impact, critical event, decision criteria. But what you're trying to understand here is okay, what's going on in their world? How is their company structured? How do they work today? What's their current process for sales engagement? How do they review and coach their calls? And then what's the impact of them not listening to their reps and like getting feedback as to how they're doing out in the field? And if they don't do this by a certain budget or sort of timeline in later in the year, what's going to happen then? Do they just continue as is or do they not? And then sharing a really cool story of somebody that has gone through a similar thing. That's the methodology that I like, that I use in SaaS. But instead of Bant, like what does Tom use, if you don't mind sharing your trade secrets, to kind of like figure out if somebody could be a fit for your solution?
Yeah, so I've kind of thrown ban out of the window, and definitely budget conversations is not one that I really bring into my discovery calls. If someone wants to know the price of SalesLoft, I'll tell them the price. But really, I'm more
Yeah.
focused on like what does the team do, and what does the day to day look like. What's the structure? How are they working? And a big one that I try and find out is like, you know, are you successful? I always ask that question. Are the team working?
Mm,
Is the team working well? Like, and 9 times out of 10, I'll get someone who'll go, well, yeah, but I feel that they could do better. And that's
Yeah.
always a great conversation to have about SalesLoft, because most people's teams are doing quite well. If they weren't, the business would crumble, right? But they're
Yeah.
always looking for ways to improve on that. So I tend to lead with stories, because I'm a big kind of
Mm.
storyteller. I'll kind of talk through how I've done the role without SalesLoft, and I've been successful, and I've
Mm.
only had a CRM, and I've hit my targets. But then I'll talk about the fact that I've done the role with SalesLoft on top of a CRM, and I've absolutely excelled, and it's changed the way that I've worked as a sales rep. And
Mm.
it's those kind of stories that I'll tell to people who are in sales, and then I'll start to navigate. Look, how could this work for your team? Now, funnily enough, that's a more exciting conversation than yeah, how much does it cost and what's going to be my ROI. I think it's more important to kind of put a spotlight on how are the team working, and how are they set up
Yeah.
for success. And that's where SalesLoft comes in. So that's yeah, that's the majority of my calls.
So I love it, dude. And I think to quote one of your colleagues and like somebody who's been on a guest on here is like with a discovery call, treat it like a cup of tea, right? Where you kind of share like how you work, what are your processes, what is it like in your world, and then asking them kind of what's their story and understanding what's their processes. And that's where you have a more engaging conversation versus Tom, do you have enough money to buy this solution? Tom, am I speaking to the right person? Tom, do you really need SalesLoft? Tom, when do you want to have SalesLoft in? It's a better way to have a conversation. And yeah, telling stories, that's key. I say to SDRs that I teach, I said, if you ever get stuck in a discovery call, tell a story, right? If somebody says, well, how does it work or what's the integration? Tell a story about how somebody connected it with their CRM. Or, like, how did you roll this out? Well, when we worked with this team, they started off with 5 users and then went up to 50 users because they wanted to see the different milestones of if it made an impact. Tell a story. If somebody says, well, I don't think we're ready for you, I said, well, actually, I've got a cool story about this guy, Tom, who thought he wasn't ready as well. And this is where Tom was. Tell stories in your discovery calls because those are more compelling reasons for somebody to take that next step and, like have a look at what you have to offer. Um, and just a thought that came into my head, like, obviously, like, I know this is a bit of a weird tangent, but obviously doing the presenting breakfast shows in the past, like creating a lot of great content, which helps promote SalesLoft, like via your LinkedIn and to your network. Have you ever thought about like a SalesLoft TV or like a SalesLoft show with host Tom Boston? Has that ever come to mind?
I mean, of course, the thought has crossed my mind, and I've got a vision somewhere in my brain of a sales loft microphone, okay, and
Yes. Yes.
and some form of interview, and kind of video, because that's where I feel the kind of. But
Mm,
watch this space, because you never know what may come in the in the future. But no,
yep.
I think it's definitely got legs, and we'll see how far we can go.
Love it. Fingers crossed for it. Because like you said, like when I was saying that, when you were talking about the show earlier and being like part of a street team and going out, meeting people face to face, hopefully with lockdown when it eases later this year or towards next year, seeing like a sales loft street team, like going into businesses and speaking to people that are using the solution and like getting their feedback from sales leaders and teams. I could definitely see you at the helm of that, mate. So you never know. Fingers crossed, we'll be watching out. But again, it's been absolutely great to have you on the show. And the penultimate question I love to ask the guests is, Tom, if you could give three bits of advice to a younger Tom Boston who's just about to embark on this journey of sales development, what would those three tips be, sir?
Yes, the first one that I thought about was be yourself, because one thing that I think that I didn't do when I first went into the role of an SDR was 100% be myself. I'd almost try to be somebody else, and that would be my first piece of advice. Just be yourself, and embrace it. Right? I was doing everything I could to make people not know that this was my first SDR role, and I was trying to, make people think I knew absolutely everything. Whereas if I could go back to my younger self, I'd be like, you're probably going to have better conversations if you're
Mm.
actually completely 100% honest with people. So I'm gonna tag that onto it actually. So yeah, be yourself and be honest. I would say would be my first one. The second one I would say would be, yeah, to be personalized. So I think a lot of people, especially in the SDR role, you'll think, well, I am personalized in everything that I do. I'll edit emails and I'll do personalized kind of videos. But I think there's an extra level to that, right? Of kind of really surprising someone in their working day about the level of interest and effort you've put in to prospecting them, right? And almost getting them to
Mm.
kind of sit back and go, wow, this person really wants my attention today, right? When
Yeah.
I'm prospecting, I try to make sure that the 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 stuff that I'm doing is the best thing that they'll receive that day. And that's the kind of mindset that
Mhm.
I try to get into. If I receive this video, would I be like, "Wow, I've not received an email like this today," or would
Yeah.
that make me laugh in a way that's gone, "Okay, yeah, well done, you got me," or have you
Yeah.
done enough research to go, how did they know that about me? Or like, where have they where have they got that from? That must be on my Twitter profile or
Mm.
something like that. So I would say, yeah, be personalized, but as an extra level to that, kind of surprise someone, right? Surprise someone that day in the effort that you've put in. And last but not least, we've touched on this throughout this show. Have fun. Two words that I think everyone should take with them on a daily basis. I put it into my LinkedIn content, and people can see that I'm having the time of my life when I do those videos, and I
Yeah.
leave the bits in where I burst out laughing at myself because I think, well, let's leave that in because if people can see how much I'm enjoying it, then that can only be a good thing. But similarly with the prospecting side of things, right? I let people in on the fact that I'm doing cold calls for an hour and a half, and I'm gasping for a cuppa. I'll have a little bit of fun
Mm.
with it, and I'll have a smile on my face when I'm making personalized videos, because I think having fun um, just rubs off on people and is infectious. And people respond to it. People can see, oh, wait, I think with the LinkedIn videos, people are going, well, what's this guy doing? He's dancing. He's
Yeah.
dancing in his kitchen. He's got a big grin on his face, and yeah, I'll have a little watch of that. Same with the prospecting, right? There's a northern bloke with a ginger beard in my email inbox, waving at the camera with a big grin on his face. Let's click play and let's see what he wants. And again,
Yeah.
I think it's such an important part of the role.
100%. If I love the whole like positive mindset and like the impact that you want to have in people, and you're empathetically thinking of, all right, if I receive something like this, how would it make me feel? Would it give me a laugh? Would it give me a giggle? Would it make me think like, wow, this person really wants my attention? And spreading that positivity is infectious, but it's a good vibe and power to put out there. And yeah, like if you have a positive impact on people, that's what makes you memorable. That's what helps break through the noise. It's what I've done through my sales career. That's why I call it happy selling, because I want to see happy sellers. I want to see people enjoying and putting some hashtag sales love out there, dude. So like salute to what you're doing and to the cause. Any special shout outs you'd like to give today, Tom?
Yeah. So before this call, you kind of talked about this idea of shout outs, and when I asked you about it, you said anyone who gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling. Anyone who knows me will know that my family are right at the center of my core, and that they're the ones that kind of motivate me to succeed. I wouldn't be doing any form of content if it wasn't for my wife, who kind of confirms, yes, this is a good idea, and gives me the confidence
Mm,
to create that kind of content. And my little boy Arthur, who it just inspires me on a daily basis to love life and to spread joy. So yeah, I would like to shout out my little family who spur me on
sure.
every single day to succeed.
Dude, I've got to be careful because I've got to really hold back the tears on that. That is a lot of love from one dad to another. That really warms my heart. And special shout out to the Bostons out there, to the family and to the crew. Like, dude, they've got your back, and it's been an absolute honor and privilege to have you on the show. And we'd love to have you back at a future date as well. But Mr. Boston, I wish you a happy, healthy, positive week ahead. Please keep putting out those videos. I'm definitely going to put some links into the show notes so people can check out who you are. And hopefully, you never know, hashtag SalesLoft TV. It could be a thing. It could happen. You never know. Mr. Boston, have a great week, and most importantly, happy selling.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me.